Good morning, everyone. I'm Froylan Hernandez, and I'm the Desert Bighorn Sheep Program Leader for Texas Parks and Wildlife. This morning, I'll be presenting the state status report for Texas. Just a brief overview of what I'll cover, beginning with our surveys, permits, habitat improvements, captures and transplants, and ending with exotic management. So even though the 2018 is outside the reporting period, I provide our 2018 count for reference, which resulted in a little over 1,000 animals observed. In 2019, we counted just over 1,100 bighorn. However, in 2020, surveys were suspended due to the fatal helo crash. And we had just begun our annual surveys at the time of the accident. We still needed a way to assess populations or get some sort of survey. We explored several options, including privately funded as well as privately conducted surveys. In other words, landowners would hire or contract out their own helo surveys and provide us their numbers. However, for many obvious reasons, we opted not to do that. And so in the end, we opted for ground counts, which they are time consuming and labor intensive, but it would still give us a sense for what kind of conditions our herds were in. The main objectives of the ground counts were to assess the herd within a specified range. And because of disease issues that we had just been through, we were trying to get a feel for the health of the animals within the herd. And then within the assessment, we were also looking closely at lamb recruitment as an indicator of herd health. And then based on our results and using the previous year's data as well as past population trends, we would also consider issuing permits, assuming that our assessment supported it. Following the ground counts and herd assessments, and after some internal discussion, we decided to issue permits for the 2020 season. And this is how the permits shook out for the reporting period. In 2019, there were 17 permits issued and 15 for 2020. Now, we had just overhauled our permit issuance system in 2018, which allowed us for flexibility in our issuance. And because of the change in permit issuance in 2018, a total of 25 permits were issued for that year, when in the past we had been averaging 12 to 15, so it was a considerable amount or a considerable increase. Again, however, in the fall of 2019, we saw our first disease-related die-off in a mountain range, namely the Van Horn Mountains, and then another disease event in the spring of 2020 in a different mountain range. So permit issuance for 2019 and 2020 reflect adjusting for those events. Had those events not occurred, then permits would have likely remained at 25 plus or higher. Now breaking it down for 2019, we issued a total of 17 permits, of which 14 went to private landowners and 3 to the state. Success rate for that year or for that hunt year was 88%. We didn't get 100% as we typically do because one permit was not used, and then another permit was actually was used, but they were unsuccessful. In 2020, we issued about the same number of permits as in 2019, a total of 15. Again, we used the ground assessment and previous year's data for justification and issuance. We still have 2 outstanding permits, so the success rate for this year or for this hunt year is currently undetermined. But of the ones who have been hunted, success rate is 100%. Fortunately, on our Texas Parks and Wildlife guided hunts, we are still harvesting rams averaging 10 years old and over 170 inches, and hopefully we'll be able to continue these trends or this trend in all future hunts. Moving on to improvements in water catchments. There were 6 new guzzlers built, which includes some on public as well as private land. These potentially add about 30,000 gallons of seasonal water out on the landscape, and 4 guzzlers were repaired or improved. And then we also had 2 earthen tanks, which were reworked. They were reworked to hold water. Not only has the Texas Bighorn Society been instrumental in expanding water sources, but also the Mule Deer Foundation has stepped up in recent years and has also contributed to the water expansion. That said, at some point we will have to consider something else, because there will be plenty of supplemental water catchments out on the landscape, which will make water less of an issue. So we will have to come up with other ways for NGOs to remain engaged. One concern that is rising is there may be some unintended consequences to these water catchments. While supplemental water benefits native wildlife, whether they're mammals or birds or what have you, it also benefits undesirable species such as aoudad. These waters are also man-made congregation points, which could serve as disease transmission points. Additionally, there are discussions now that water sources could also influence predation. So we need to be mindful of these potential issues, and we should be asking ourselves, do the benefits outweigh the risks? Talking about a restoration, or moving on to restorations and captures. In December 2019, 74 bighorns were captured on Elephant Mountain, of which 44 were males and 30 females. Of those 74, 52 were radio collared, and these were all translocated to Black Gap, where they were either hard or soft released. Right about that same time in December of 2019, we were tapering off a disease event in the Van Horn Mountains, which had began earlier that year, which is over, and Van Horn, the Van Horn Mountains are over 100 miles northwest of Black Gap. Samples were collected from many of the mortalities, or most of the mortalities, and most mortalities were attributed to bacterial pneumonia. Some of the pathogens found include Mannheima as well as Trupperella. MOV was only found or detected in 1 lung PCR from all the samples submitted. And in attempts to investigate the disease event further, we also conducted a field reconnaissance. However, we spotted several bighorns but failed to detect any clinical animals. And at this point, we haven't had any new mortalities out on the landscape, any known mortalities out on the landscape. Black Gap was the other site where a disease event occurred. and as in the Bighorn Mountains, bacterial pneumonia was also involved. However, at Black Gap, MOV was detected in most mortalities, and blue tongue was also detected in six mortalities, but MOV was detected in only one of those 6 mortalities. We continue to closely monitor those populations and hope that the disease might still be there, but hopefully causing less havoc. As for research, the projects on both Black Gap and the Bighorn Mountains will serve 3 master's projects, of which some preliminary results have been presented earlier. We're also collaborating with the Texas A&M College of Veterinary Medicine on an Aoudad Desert Bighorn Sheep disease transmission study. And once these projects are complete, information will undoubtedly help us make decisions as we move forward with Desert Bighorn restoration management. In addition to our novel disease issues, we continue to face challenges with these exotic ungulates. Aoudad hunting has been growing in popularity within the last several years, and hunts that at one time were relatively inexpensive are now going for $5,000 to $7,000. And when a landowner can conduct multiple hunts throughout the year, it just doesn't take much or many hunts to make a substantial amount of supplemental income. And because of their high densities, Aoudad are also a seemingly endless resource. Additionally, data suggesting that they can be potential disease risk or disease threat. Through our disease monitoring and surveillance program, MOV has been detected in a few Aoudad within the last couple of years. And we are optimistic that the collaborative project with the Texas A&M will shed light on the disease transmission potential. So in addition to the high densities, this disease risk is also very concerning. Lastly, we have been going through an extensive aerial protocol review. The purpose of this review is to ensure that we are doing everything within our control to make the aerial work that is conducted as safely as possible. We reviewed our protocol internally and then reached out to some of y'all, such as New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, among others, for input. And we greatly appreciate your suggestions and recommendations, and are certainly considering making those adjustments. We are in our final phase of the review, and even though it will be a living document once the review is complete, it will be a comprehensive document covering all aerial surveys, not just Bighorn surveys. So all surveys, whether fixed wing or a helicopter, and it will hopefully enhance the safety of our aerial work. So in parting, colleagues and friends, as we continue to perform our duties, I hope y'all stay safe, and not just safe, but also stay well. I leave you with my contact info in case we run out of time for any questions and don't get to your questions. Thank you.